Today, our topic is walking with the marginalized, our undocumented students. I would like to introduce a great colleague of mine who has led strategic growth and development of academic community engagement, the director of the Center for Social Impact at Fairfield University, Dr. Melissa Quan. Melissa, welcome to the Diversity in Action podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Pejay. I'm so happy to be here and so honored you invited me to join you.
Awesome. Well, Melissa, we're in meetings all the time, but sometimes we don't ask the simple question of, can you just share a little bit about yourself and, tell us what's your hometown and maybe something that most people wouldn't know about you by just looking at you.
Sure. Yeah. So I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is not Philadelphia, but on the other side of the state, bordering Ohio. So that's where I was born and raised. That's where most of my family still is. And I've been here in Connecticut for, I guess it's almost 23, 24 years now. That I've been in this area, and now I live in Fairfield.
Awesome. Well, Melissa, you're doing some great work when it comes to higher education, community engagement. What inspired you to begin this work?
That's a good question. Community service was just really always a part of my life. Just thinking back really to probably my middle school years, where one of my closer friends, her father was the director of mission and ministry. I went to a Catholic grade school. And so I just, she invited me to be a part of some of the service immersion experiences that he led. I just really, kind of connected that way and really enjoyed being a part of that work. And I just continued it through high school and into college. But I guess specifically the work that I'm doing now, community engaged learning, I think the inspiration there were a few people here at Fairfield University or who were at Fairfield University, Dr. Robin Crabtree, who you might remember, and Dr. Wendy Coley. When I first came to Fairfield, I worked in campus ministry, and my responsibility was to facilitate local community service, as well as a few of our international immersion experiences. But I also got my master's in education here. And it was through that program that I was introduced to community engaged learning or service learning. And I remember just kind of really looking at a poster on the wall and seeing that Dr. Robin Crabtree was hosting a brown bag on service learning because we didn't really have an infrastructure for it at that time. And I just decided to go to the brown bag. And that was what really kind of sparked my interest. I started to study it. I made it the topic of my master's thesis. And so that's sort of the origins of my vocation, I guess, now.
That's amazing. Well, first, I didn't know that you were in campus ministry.
Yeah.
Prior to where you are now. Who was the director at that time? I'm just wondering.
Dr. Paul Carrier.
Awesome, man. Well, you never know where you may end up depending on where you start, right?
Yep.
Man, that's amazing. Well, Melissa, one thing that I do know, and we've partnered in the past on some work around undocumented students. Can you discuss some of the work that you've done when it comes to supporting undocumented students and their families?
Sure. So I first kind of became involved with this work back in 2010. At the time, the director of the Center for Faith and Public Life, so as you know, before the center was the Center for Social Impact, we were known as the Center for Faith and Public Life. We were founded as the Center for Faith and Public Life, and Father Rick Rascavage was the founding director. And his expertise was really in issues related to immigrants and refugees. He was the former director of the Jesuit Refugee Services. And so a lot of our early research was focused on topics related to immigrants and refugees. And in 2010, we received a pretty large grant from the Ford Foundation to study the kind of issues related to undocumented students in higher education with a focus on Jesuit higher education. And so we embarked on a 2-year study and pretty large implementation project that was focused on the 28 Jesuit colleges and universities in the United States to really understand from the perspective of both staff and faculty, as well as undocumented students themselves, what students experienced in both terms of challenge and support. And so we wanted to understand from the perspective of faculty and staff, do you believe this is an important part of our Jesuit mission? Supporting undocumented students is an important part of our Jesuit mission. And if so, what do you know about how they experience their time in college, and what supports are available, what supports are needed. And then we also interviewed students to understand their perspective. And the rollout of the project or the dissemination of the project included a fairly high profile event in Washington, D.C., where we invited Congress men and women to come and hear the presentation with the hope of being able to inform and influence policy as well. So that was really how I became involved in the issue, and I learned so much through the opportunity to participate in that research project, and it just kind of became associated with the center. And we've been involved since then, really, in trying to implement strategies at the university to better support undocumented students.
Definitely. That's amazing. And again, I didn't know that you've been doing this since 2010, Melissa. Man.
Yeah, I know. Time flies, right?
Yeah. This is some great work that needs to be done. Is there anything specific that you're working on currently around supporting those students for like this, maybe just a specific initiative around undocumented students that folks may need to know about that may not be aware of?
Sure. I mean, I think always is just staying up to date on policy changes so that we know how to best support students and to help raise their awareness to what is available to them and how we as a community can support them. But I think as you and I have talked quite a bit about, I think we have learned too that the challenges that undocumented students face on campus are not uncommon or unlike challenges that other marginalized communities on campus experience. And one of the primary challenges that we've been talking a lot about, particularly this past year, is how to make more visible and transparent the supports that exist. Because I think students still find themselves, trying to navigate an informal network, of trusted messengers to try to figure out what is available to them when they can't make a tuition payment, or they don't have access to health care, or, they run into any sort of challenge. And I know I find myself still, even though I've been involved in this work for so long, sometimes advising students, well, why don't you give so-and-so a call? And if that doesn't work, give so-and-so a call, or you can apply to this fund or that fund or this fund. And I think we can do better. I think we can do better than that. I think we can make it more visible and transparent, more streamlined, so that we're not kind of sending them on a scavenger hunt to find the resources they need to be successful here at Fairfield University.
Definitely. Within the last year, right? Or however long it's been, a year and a few months, now that the pandemic has hit and we've had the quarantine at different times, we have to stay in place. How have you seen this affect our undocumented folks, specifically on the campus, student-wise, their families, their really how they've had to adjust and the word of the year is pivot, with maybe how they've had to learn to really stay focused on their education. What have you seen? And are there any stories that you can share with us that may give us a better insight on the effect of the pandemic and our undocumented students?
Sure. I can speak both from the perspective of working with students on campus, but then also the work we do with community partners who serve undocumented populations. I think generally speaking, between the pandemic and the kind of political context that we've been operating in for the past few years, it really kind of pushed undocumented persons into the shadows a bit. And so then when you enter into a crisis situation and you have a community that is already struggling, that may be impacted further by a crisis, but for varied reasons might be afraid to ask for assistance, then that becomes a heightened crisis and a heightened problem. And I think too, over the past 4 or 5 years, there has been I don't want to say weekly, that's an exaggeration, but so many changes around immigration policy, and it just kind of keeps. I know it keeps people like me constantly on my toes trying to figure things out. So I can't even imagine what that experience is like for someone directly impacted. I'm trying to stay on top of things and to understand who to trust. One of the things that happens specific to our campus, and this is no fault of our campus, but last year when the CARES funding became available from the federal government to provide support to students in higher education and to colleges and universities, that funding wasn't available to undocumented students. So when the university had to send out their messaging, they're sending out a message that says, we have this support that's available to students, but only if you're a citizen. And so it was confusing, I think, for students to read that and to understand, what they could apply for and what they couldn't apply for, what was available to them and what wasn't available to them. So I think that's a direct, implication. Talking with some of our community partners, we did a lot of work. I think everyone became aware of how food insecurity really spiked during the COVID pandemic. And, in talking with our community partners, a lot of them said that they were not seeing as many undocumented persons as they would expect coming for assistance. And that was out of fear. They didn't want to be kind of caught standing in line or in any way exposing themselves. And so I think those are some of the implications of our immigration policy over the past, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I've watched a little bit of a few articles. I watched a few videos and read a few articles that just talked about some undocumented folks' experiences that were students that were working to manage home as well as their academic life,
Right.
And just the pressure and anxiety that rose up in many of these folks.
Sure.
What I wonder is with hearing those things, and even some of the things that you just mentioned about food insecurities, what do you believe, especially here at Fairfield, right? Our mission, our value is so strongly interwoven with social justice, right? We believe in radical hospitality, men and women for others. So some of our values. What do you believe is our role as a community when it comes to supporting undocumented students? And then I continue to say this, not just undocumented students, but also their families, right? Because if we're truly supporting them, we may need to support their families in certain ways. So I just wonder, what do you think our role is as an institution when it comes to supporting our students?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question, a really good point, Pejay. So one of the things that we learned through the research that we did back in 2010, 2012, was the kind of psychological burden that undocumented students carry with them, that is rooted in the fear, fear for themselves and fear for their families. And we were right in the middle of our research when President Obama enacted deferred action for childhood arrival. And that executive order at that time really provided protection for, I think it was hundreds of thousands of college students, young people, but college age students as well. And it gave them a level of protection, but in order to gain access to that protection, they had to share information that put others in their family at risk, because they were basically sharing their information with the federal government. And they really talked in their interviews about the struggle with that, that it was protection for themselves, but they felt like they were either leaving their family behind or exposing their family in some way. And I think, even without deferred action for childhood arrival, because the reality is many of the students that we have on our campus now don't meet the eligibility requirements for DACA, because it hasn't really been updated. And so, the date that they had to apply, or the age eligibility, many of our students just don't meet that right now. But even being on campus, there's a level of, probably safety and protection that comes with that. And they're constantly worrying about their families that they can't see or be with every day. And I think the reality is too, there's very little that we can do as a college campus about that. I mean, we can do the best that we possibly can to support the students when they're here, and to guide them as they think about their future. Beyond that, it's advocacy. It's advocating for policies that will really create sustainable change for immigrant communities. And it's the DREAM Act that would create a pathway to citizenship, not just a 2-year work permit and deferred action protection for people. And there are bills that have been proposed too that expand that protection to the parents of undocumented youth. And so I think those are the things that we can do as individuals, and to some extent as an institution as well.
Awesome. Yeah. I think when I said an institution, right, and I just want to reframe that and say, as a Fairfield University community, right, I don't want to leave out our alumni and alumnus
Sure.
From the conversation. Because like you just mentioned, I think it's all of our responsibilities to advocate for those that are more marginalized. And I believe it was the Pope. Was it one of his apostolic decrees? Am I saying that right? Where it was
apostolic preference? Yeah.
Thank you. Apostolic preferences, walking with the marginalized. And I just think that's part of our values and part of who we are as a Jesuit community, that we have to make sure that we're considering others. One question I had for you is, let's say someone was working with some folks, if they're an alumni or a community member, and they needed help when it came to supporting undocumented students, whether it was, finding places around for legal issues or any of those type of things. Where would they go? Who would they talk to on campus? I mean, I know your office is doing a lot of that work. Is there someone in particular, yourself, or any of the members of your team that would be able to help these folks?
Yeah, certainly. Any member of our team here in the Center for Social Impact would be able to kind of provide support and guidance, and I know your office as well. I think what I'd love to see us achieve, and maybe this is even something we could achieve by the end of the summer, is some kind of visible resource that people were aware of, something on the website, or a place that people could go, at least as an initial stop to have some basic questions answered, and also have our offices and our names listed as resources and what we can provide. And I think that would be a good step in, kind of taking what is currently the more kind of shadow network of support and making it more visible and more accessible to anyone on campus who would want to support or might encounter someone in need.
Definitely, definitely. So again, Melissa, you're doing some great work. Can you just share with us maybe someone that has inspired you to continue doing this great work that you're doing? Uh, is there anyone that really you think about? You know what, this pushed me into going into this work, or motivation to continue doing this work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think on this particular topic, I think it's been through the opportunity to work directly with people and just learn and hear their story. When I worked in campus ministry, one of the international experiences that we offered at the time was in Mexico. And as part of that, we actually stayed in a migrant shelter on the border. And just really had the opportunity to be with people. We shared meals with them, and just had the opportunity to kind of hear their story. And that's certainly the experience I've had, starting with the study that we did in 2010. And since then is just hearing the stories of students and understanding, or maybe, gaining some sense of understanding of the challenge that they've experienced, and as well as what it takes to kind of remain resilient, to be successful. And I think that's certainly where I draw the kind of inspiration to continue the work, because it's about helping it's about supporting our fellow human beings,
Yes.
our brothers and sisters.
Agree. Now, are there any leaders that you may follow, whether on social media or that you're reading their articles that are doing some of this work, that you would encourage folks to follow or check out?
Sure. My go-to, like when I'm trying to find, what's the most updated information, or if someone in the community contacts me and says, I actually get this question a lot from people in the community that I'm connected with. They they're working with a student. They may have just learned that this student is undocumented, and they want to pursue college, but they just don't know what to do. So my go-to is always United Students for a Dream. And they have chapters all over the country. There is a local chapter, Connecticut Students for a Dream, and they just have amazing resources for young people, for families and allies of young people, undocumented people who are interested in pursuing higher education. So that's definitely one of the organizations, not an individual person, but a great organization. And then the other one is the Ignatian Solidarity Network. And that would be more for the purpose of advocacy. They've really been a consistent leader in, organizing, particularly the Jesuit network, Jesuit colleges and universities, as well as high schools, around advocacy to support not only undocumented students, but immigration in general. So those are kind of my two go-to organizations when I want to know what's the latest and what can I do.
Awesome. And now, for any students or prospective students that may be watching, are there any student clubs or organizations that you would say that are doing some great work out there when it comes to some of this advocacy work?
Doing advocacy work?
Yes, or just getting involved with advocacy work. I know that I believe it's Lucario. Isn't he have an organization? I know they're connected with your office. Is that an organization that folks may need to look out for or want to join for our prospective students or current students?
Yes, definitely. I would say our Humanitarian Action Club and our associate director, Julie Mughal, heads that up. And as you said, Lucario is one of our outgoing Humanitarian Action Fellows. But it's a great space for, well, number one, they do a lot of advocacy around issues related to immigrants and refugees. But it's also a space where students can have some agency in deciding what it is that they want to advocate for, and what they really want to get involved in. So I definitely would say the Humanitarian Action Club. And I'd send them to your office as well. I know there have been students, we've never really had a sustained kind of student group dedicated to this topic of undocumented or documented students. But there have been kind of fits and starts over the years. And so I might, also encourage students with the support of either my office or your office to really think about getting something started again and seeing if we could sustain it.
Definitely. And Melissa, you're definitely right. Student diversity and multicultural affairs is definitely a home for our students, especially our undocumented students, and we are definitely here to support you all. So again, we encourage folks to feel free to reach out to us. We're here to support you. Again, if there are any community partners that want to do some more of this work, you can either reach out to myself or to Dr. Melissa Quan, who I'm very excited about, who just finished her dissertation not too long ago.
Yeah, thank you.
And has become a doctor. So again, congratulations on that, Melissa.
Thanks, Pejay.
Well, Melissa, I have one huge question for you. And this question we like to end off on is a very powerful question. We like to end with something sweet. What is your favorite candy?
Oh, this is a tough one. Let's see. Well, I'm going to go today with Caramello. So I love a good milk chocolate with some gooey caramel inside. And it's definitely a love I share with my daughter. We're kind of two peas in a pod when it comes to our candy cravings, and caramel chocolate, specifically milk chocolate. That's our thing.
Melissa, Caramello, I wasn't expecting that one. You don't hear that one often. You really don't.
No, I know. It's.
But that definitely, caramel sounds good. Actually, I don't think I've ever had a Caramello, and I like caramel and I like milk chocolate.
I recommend that if you can find one. You can't find them everywhere, but.
Now, Melissa, is that a Pittsburgh thing? Were they located in Pittsburgh? Are they definitely there?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I have to look back at that. I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
Well, I've seen them, but like you said, I don't see them often.
Yeah. Maybe that's the source of it.
It could be. Certain states have certain candies.
Yeah.
I know I spent summers in North Carolina with my grandmother. And down there, again, we would go down to see different candies and our sodas and come back up like, wait a minute, where is it at?
Yeah.
So, well, Melissa, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I really appreciate even the times that we partner, just to know you and see the passion that you put into this work. It motivates me to keep on going on and it pushes me to do more. So thank you for the great work that you're doing and that you continue to do. Just thank you. And I appreciate this work.
Well, thank you, Pejay. I love partnering with you and with your team, and look forward to continuing that work together. Appreciate you as well.
Awesome. To our viewers, again, this is our podcast, Diversity in Action. Feel free to check out this episode. This is episode 4. We've had 3 other great episodes. Feel free to check them out. We've had some great guests that are committed to diversity in action. Thank you.